Welcome to the first episode of Reinventability. My name is Nataly Kogan, and I am really excited to be your host and go on this adventure together. So, in this first episode, I want to begin by introducing you to three parts of yourself you may not be aware of. Are you ready to meet them? They are your three possible future selves: the future self you aspire to become, the future self you expect to become, and the future self you fear becoming. We all, every single one of us, has these possible future selves in our self concept, but most of the time we are not consciously aware of them. But the reason I want to draw your attention to them and the reason I want to begin there is it turns out, and there's a growing body of research on this that I have to be honest with you has really impacted me and my mindset and how I think about the choices I'm making, and has really helped a lot of the people that I mentor. There's a growing body of research that is showing that it is our possible future selves and our concept of them that has a lot to do with what is motivating us, with the choices and the decisions that we're making in the present moment. So I want to have a little thought experiment to really bring this home for you. Did you have a cup of tea or coffee this morning? Probably, right? I had a cup of coffee. I always drink coffee in the morning, and then afternoon, no more coffee. I just drink tea. So let's say you had a cup of coffee this morning. Why did you have that cup of coffee? Kind of a funny question. You wanted the cup of coffee, right? But think about it. The reason that you had that cup of coffee is because you envisioned the future self you wanted to become once you drank it. Maybe the cup of coffee helps you feel energized, right? So you envision that future self who's energized and you want to be that future self. Or maybe that cup of coffee just brings you a lot of joy and you wanted to be the future self who experiences that joy. So it is your concept, your envisioning, however subconsciously it was, of your future self that motivated you to make yourself a cup of coffee. Now, what does our past have to do with our future self concept? Well, of course, our past impacts us a lot, and the past experiences we've had and circumstances of our lives, they've informed in many ways how we think about the future. You've had coffee before. You know that drinking coffee helps you feel more energized. You know that drinking coffee is something you enjoy. But the past, you can think about it almost like a reservoir of information. So instead of thinking of the past as deterministic, you can think of it as it has all of this information that we can draw on, right? That we have all this knowledge, all this experience that is impacting us. But it is our future self and how we envision the future self we want to become or don't want to become. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. That is actually motivating our choices, that is motivating our day-to-day decisions. And I find that really powerful. I don't know if you do. For me, when I started to understand this and really dive into this research, it was a giant mindset shift. And the reason I find it so powerful is that no matter what has happened in the past and whatever you have gone through in your life, at any moment in time, you have the ability to choose a different future. You have the ability to envision the future self you really aspire to become and then take action to move towards it. And this is what I call reinventability. Reinventability is the capacity that you have to take action to grow into the future self that you have envisioned. And it's a capacity that all of us have. It is inherent to being human because think about your life, right? You have been doing this your whole life. Every time you've learned a new skill, every time you overcame a challenge, every time you started a new job, you were envisioning a future self you wanted to be, and then you were doing things, you were taking action to become that, to grow into that. So it's a capacity that we all have. You know, as I'm saying this to you, I have this memory that my parents talk about. I don't remember it. I was about 3 years old. And apparently I wanted to learn how to tie my own shoelaces. And I was very stubborn. I still am. And I didn't want my parents to help me. And so I took this, we had this little green bench, and I took this little green bench and I put it in the hallway and I sat down And according to my parents, for the next couple hours, I just tried to figure out how to tie my shoelaces. Eventually I did. And now my family makes fun of me because I still do the bunny ears. It's effective. It works. But I figured it out. I wasn't conscious of this at the time, but naturally, and again, we all have this capacity. I envisioned the future self I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone who knows how to tie her shoelaces. And then I sat there and I took action to embody it, to grow into it. So reinventability is a capacity that we all have as human beings. And you and I are here in this moment connecting this way because our ancestors used their reinventability thousands of years ago, right? Think about it. They looked at a rock, and within that rock, they envisioned a tool. And then they took action to carve it out, to create the tool so they could get access to better food. They envisioned the possibility. They envisioned their future selves who had enough food, and then they took action to get there. So this is a capacity we all have, but the thing, like with any other skill, if you're not intentionally practicing it, you become rusty. You stumble. You might even begin to believe that it is not something you're good at. A lot of people tell me, Nataly, I am not good at change. I am terrible at change and growth, and like anything with change, I'm awful at. But that is not true. You cannot be bad at change because you're a human being. And to be a human being is to constantly be changing and evolving and growing. What people mean when they say I am bad at change is I am uncomfortable with change. I fear change. And of course, change is really hard because the human brain has one objective, and that is to keep us safe from danger. And whenever there's change, whenever we have to evolve or grow in a certain way, we have to step into the unknown. We have to step into uncertainty. And that for the human brain is terrifying because there's possible danger in uncertainty. There's loss of control. The brain doesn't know how it's going to protect us from danger. So that's the source of fear that we feel around change and discomfort and doubt. So it's natural. But at the same time that the brain does that, you still have this ability because you've been doing it your whole life. We've all been doing it our whole lives. And so it's not that you're bad at change. It's that your brain is making you uncomfortable because it fears uncertainty. And part of getting better at reinventability is learning how to support yourself through that uncertainty. And I'm so excited to share with you in many upcoming episodes, in interviews that I've done with authors and experts and people who really reinvented in all kinds of ways, to share with you their paths and their experience so that you can learn how to support yourself, how to fear that uncertainty less, how to power up your ability to reinvent with certain mindset shifts and certain ways that you go about it. So that's all that's coming up. And this is really the hard purpose of this podcast, is to inspire and empower and encourage you to embrace reinventability, to embrace this capacity that you already have, to embrace change as an opportunity to grow and evolve into this future self that you really want to be, to inspire you to intentionally envision the future self you want to be. Because what I find, and this was true for me before I came to this research, while we each have these concepts of these possible future selves, we're often not conscious of them. We don't intentionally envision the future self we want to become. And that is very, very powerful. And I encourage you to do it. Maybe after you finish listening to this episode, spend a few moments just reflecting on who is the future self that you want to become, that you aspire to become. Think about your inner atmosphere, your beliefs, your values. Think about the work you're doing, the relationships, the way your community is. Think about what beliefs you have about yourself. And it's really powerful to write this down and do the same for the other two possible selves, right? So there's the future self you aspire to be. And then envision this future self you will become if you kind of just keep going the way you are. And then reflect on the future self that you fear becoming. What don't you want to embody? And it might sound really morbid, but it's quite a powerful motivator, because especially when you might feel that fear of taking a certain action, right? Because things are uncertain. You might in that moment think about, well, my future self, will that future self regret taking that action or not taking that action? Right? So it's really, really powerful and impactful to intentionally envision your possible future selves, because that is how you tap into why are you making certain choices. And when you can intentionally envision, like, here is the future self that I really want to become, that becomes a really powerful motivator for you on a day-to-day basis. And I want to share with you the first time that I can remember that I practiced this capacity for reinventability in a very intentional way, right? My shoelaces, I didn't set out this whole vision. I just really wanted to tie the shoelaces. But when I was 13 years old, my parents and I left our home in the former Soviet Union where I grew up, and with a few suitcases and a few $100s, set out on a journey to try and come to the United States as refugees. And after spending several months in refugee settlements in Europe, we were given permission to come to the US as refugees. Incredibly grateful for it. And here we were. We actually arrived in August of 1989. I was 13. I was going to 8th grade, and we were really excited, but it was completely overwhelming. I mean, I can't even imagine for my parents. My husband and I talk about this. We are now a few years older than my parents were then, to come to a new country with absolutely nothing, not really knowing English, not really knowing how things work. I mean, they're my heroes. But for me, it was also really hard. I was 13. I have a 20-year-old daughter. I remember her at 13. I mean, it's all just emotional soup. You're a mess at that age. And everything I knew was gone. I spoke a tiny bit of English, and whatever English I did speak, it came out of my mouth with this really terrible accent. And all the kids would laugh at me in school. And, my only kind of solid identity to that point was I was really great at school. I was kind of a nerd. I'm still kind of a nerd. I love nerds. And here I was, and I wasn't doing well in school because I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't understand. And so I really, for me, that became the thing. I wanted to be the future self who spoke English without an accent. And thankfully, I encountered a really great role model. It was a bit of a surprising one. Do you remember the show called Who's the Boss? It's from the 80s. And now I know if you're on the younger side and you're listening to this and you just went, what? I have no idea. Google it. And if you know what I'm talking, welcome to this trip down memory lane. So it was a really popular 80s show. And on it, there was this teenager. Her name was Sam. She was played by Alyssa Milano. And she became my embodiment of the future self I wanted to be, because she spoke English so flawlessly. And she was really carefree. And also she had these high top Jordache sneakers with pink shoelaces that I was dying for. But most of all, it was the way she spoke English, and just so flawlessly, and no one made fun of her. And so that became the future self that I wanted to be. For me, if I could be that's all that mattered. And so what I did was I would come home from school. I didn't have any friends to hang out with. So I came home from school. I would get a box of Rice Krispies. We got food donation boxes. And for some reason, there was always Rice Krispies. I don't know why, but I loved cereal because we didn't have dry cereal in Russia. So I'd get some Rice Krispies, some milk, and I'd get a mirror, because what I would do is I would watch the show. It was on at 3:30. I remember it was 3:30 and sometimes even 4:30 again. And I'd watch the show, and whenever Sam spoke, I would look at the mirror and I would try to imitate what she said, because TV is actually a great language teacher. You see how the person's mouth moves and you hear what they're saying. And so it helps you to kind of figure that out. So I would hear what she said and say the same thing, looking at the mirror, trying to mimic her mouth motions. And I would do this every single day. And I went and I started reading other things about language acquisition and linguistics, and tried to do all these other things to help with pronunciation. But who's the boss? Sam. That was my main teacher. And I did learn to speak English without an accent. I don't know if I sound like Alyssa Milano. You can tell me. It took me a while. It wasn't overnight, but I became the future self that I envisioned. I became someone who spoke English without an accent. And that is my first experience of intentionally practicing reinventability, intentionally envisioning the future self I wanted to become, and then taking action to find pathways to get there. And that's a really big part of reinventability that we're going to be exploring in different conversations on this podcast. Often you have this vision of the future self you want to be. Maybe you want to take on, a more senior role in your company so you can have amplified positive impact, or there's a new craft that's calling to you, or you're changing careers and something like you feel a call inside of you to do something else and you have a vision for it, but you may not know how to get there. And this is often where people get stuck is, I have this vision of the future self I want to be in my career or otherwise, but I'm not sure how to get there. And I'm really excited to explore this in different conversations and different episodes coming up, because one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that you don't have to know the path to begin to take action. In fact, you create the path by taking steps. There actually is no direct path between where you are now and the future self you want to become. It's going to require you taking action and learning and experimenting, and a bunch of stuff is not going to work out, and you're going to learn from that. And so it's all about taking action, because we learn so much from action. One of my mantras in life is do before you overthink, because I think it can be tempting to try and plan it all out. But what's the saying? We plan and God laughs. I find that very true in my life. And so if you're feeling this way, like you're listening to me now, and maybe you have this vision of an aspect of your future self that you want to embody, but you don't have a plan. You're not sure exactly how to get there, and that's holding you back. Begin. Take one action. Have one exploratory conversation. Sign up for one class. Go to one event. Learn something about that path or how you could move forward. With every step, you learn something, including about yourself, and you learn about the next step you want to take, and another, and another, and another. Clarity emerges through action. We can't really create the full plan to get there. Thank you so much for joining me for this adventure and for this first episode. In every single upcoming episode, we're going to have a segment where I answer, or our guest answers, a listener question. And I would love for you to send me your questions that you have about growth, reinvention, envisioning your future self, overcoming fear, overcoming doubt, whatever comes up for you. So the best way to send me your question is to send an email to Nataly, it's Nataly, @happier.com, and just put in the subject line, put podcast or reinventability. And that way we know it's a question about the podcast. And also send me your topic suggestions. What do you want us to cover on the podcast? What do you want me to talk about? What kind of questions and topics do you want me to explore? Some of the episodes will be just me, like this one. A lot of the episodes will be interviews with authors and thought leaders and experts and people who have reinvented themselves in really meaningful ways. So would love to make this as collaborative as we can. So send me your questions, send me your topic suggestions. And before we wrap, I want to just mention one thing. One of the challenges that people tell me they have when they think about envisioning their future self is they feel trapped in a way by their past. So they say it's hard to envision something different from what I've been used to, from what I've experienced in my life. And I just want to acknowledge that it's a real thing. If that's how you feel, it's absolutely normal. And so one thing that I just want to offer you as we wrap this first episode is more dreaming and more curiosity. What are you curious about? What is pulling at your soul? What is something that you really want to, like, it's literally pulling at you to explore? What is some dream that you had or have had that maybe has felt so wild, you're not even sure where it's coming from? Don't dismiss that, because those are all seeds for the future self that you want to become. And if you can just honor and start paying attention, eventually you can create that clear vision for yourself of the future self you want to become. And you can start practicing your inner capacity for reinventability by taking steps to actually grow into that future self. I am so grateful to have you on this journey with me, and I am excited to see and be in your ear for our next episode.